In 1943, above the freezing skies of northern Germany, a German fighter pilot made a decision in seconds, one that would save a life. He had no idea that this moment would return to him decades after the war, in a world that no longer resembled the one he fought for. And change everything he believed about enemies, fate, and honor. By late 1943, the war in Europe had reached a violent turning point. The Allies were determined to crush the German industrial machine. The Luftwaffe, once feared for its dominance, was now stretched thin, exhausted pilots, fuel shortages, and constant pressure on every front. American daylight bombing raids had grown larger and deadlier. Hundreds of B-17s and B-24s crossed into German airspace almost weekly, their mission simple yet devastating. Destroy Germany's ability to make war. But every raid came with a heavy cost. For American crews, the skies over Germany were a gauntlet of exploding flak shells, relentless fighter attacks, freezing temperatures that turned metal brittle, and distances so long many aircraft never made it home. For German pilots, the struggle was equally merciless. They were outnumbered, forced to attack massed formations of bombers while constantly watching their fuel gauges and counting the friends they had lost. This was not a battlefield of glory. It was a place where survival meant everything, and where rules of chivalry, once cherished by pilots in earlier wars, were fading into the smoke. Yet on a bitter day in December, one German pilot would revive a code many believed the war had long buried. Franz Stigler, born in Regensburg, grew up in a Germany very different from the one at war. His father, a stern yet fair man, taught him discipline and responsibility. His brother, August, introduced him to flying, first in gliders that lifted gently over Bavarian fields, then in aircraft that climbed above the clouds. Flying wasn't just a skill. It was a bond between the brothers, and a dream Franz never imagined would lead him into a world consumed by conflict. When August died during flight training, something inside Franz changed forever. He swore he would become the kind of pilot August had wanted to be, skilled, honorable, fearless, someone who lived by a sense of responsibility larger than himself. By the time 1943 arrived, Franz had survived more than most pilots ever would. Brutal dogfights over North Africa. Sandstorms and engine failures. Ambushes by Allied fighters. The slow exhaustion of endless sorties. And the constant pressure of watching his squadron shrink with every passing month. His superiors saw him as one of their finest. But the war had carved deeper marks into him than anyone could see. He carried grief for the men he had lost. He carried guilt for the kills he never wanted but was forced to take. And he carried a quiet determination. No matter how dark the war became, he would not lose the humanity that made him a pilot, not a machine. December 20, 1943. Franz had just returned from a mission when reports arrived of a large American bomber formation heading home after striking Bremen. Many had been damaged. Some were falling behind. He refueled quickly, climbed back into his Bf-109, and took off once more, the cold biting through his gloves as he lifted into a sky already scarred by smoke trails. As he broke through the clouds, he saw nothing at first. Just silence. The eerie quiet that comes after battle. Then, a distant shape. Alone. Moving slow. He pushed the throttle forward. What came into view was unlike anything he had seen before. A B-17, but barely recognizable. The tail was torn open. The rear guns hung twisted like broken limbs. The nose was smashed inward. One propeller was stopped, another spinning unevenly. Chunks of the fuselage were simply missing, ripped away by flak and cannon fire. No squadron. No protection. Just a single bomber trying desperately to survive. Franz felt the professional instinct rise inside him. This was an easy kill. A guaranteed victory. He approached, preparing for the final attack. But then something told him to get closer. To look. And that choice would change everything. As Franz eased his aircraft beside the crippled bomber, he saw straight into the soul of the machine. Inside, chaos. Crewmen slumped over their guns. One lying motionless beside a torn-open section of the fuselage. Blood smeared across metal. Frost gathering on eyebrows and coats. A scene that looked more like a tomb than an aircraft. He pulled closer to the cockpit. The pilot, a young man with exhaustion carved into his face, struggled to keep the bomber level. Barely conscious, he blinked at the German fighter beside him. This wasn't bravado. This wasn't defiance. This was a man hanging on to life by a thread. Franz felt a shock he couldn't explain, a clash between duty and something deeper. He remembered his brother's teachings. He remembered the oath he made to himself. If he fired now, it would not be combat. It would be murder. His finger hovered over the trigger. And slowly drifted away. In that silent, cold sky, between two aircraft that should have been mortal enemies, something extraordinary happened. Franz lifted his hand to his forehead and saluted. The American pilot, Charlie Brown, stared in disbelief. Franz then gestured. "Follow me." The message was clear. The German pilot was offering safe passage. Side by side, enemies flew together, a sight so unbelievable that even the B-17's surviving crew could barely comprehend it. Franz guided the bomber toward the sea, deliberately flying close so German gunners would see the escort and hold their fire. He stayed with them until they reached open water, until the bomber was finally safe. Only then did Franz pull away. No words. No signals. Just a final nod. As he disappeared into the clouds. When Charlie Brown landed in England, ground crews froze at the sight of the aircraft, shredded, half destroyed, held together by luck and courage alone. The crew reported the German fighter who spared them. The officers dismissed it. Then they forbade the crew from ever mentioning it again. The military could not allow stories of honorable enemies to circulate. War depended on fear, not respect. Across the front, Franz returned to base in silence. He could tell no one. A German pilot sparing an American bomber was an act punishable by death. But Franz felt something that surprised him. Not regret. Not fear. But peace. For the first time in months, he felt like himself again. Like the man his brother would have been proud of. The war marched on. The world moved forward. But neither Franz nor Charlie ever forgot the face of the man on the other side of the glass. Nearly 50 years passed. Charlie Brown built a life, raised a family, yet the memory of the German pilot never left him. Every winter, every time he saw clouds drifting over the horizon, he wondered. Who was he? Did he survive? Why did he spare us? In 1990, he began a full search, writing letters, contacting veteran groups, digging into archives. Months passed. Then a reply came. A former Luftwaffe pilot in Canada remembered the incident vividly, the date, the crippled bomber, the decision. His name was Franz Stigler. When they met for the first time, decades of questions evaporated in a single moment of recognition. These men, once separated by war and ideology, embraced like long-lost brothers. They spent the rest of their lives connected by a bond forged in a moment the world was never meant to see. The Second World War was filled with destruction, hatred, and unimaginable loss. But stories like this remind us that even in humanity's darkest hours, a single act of compassion can echo across generations. If you want more forgotten stories from history's darkest and brightest hours, don't forget to subscribe.